Okay, this week I get a chance to speak to somebody who I know pretty well, actually. His name's, I'm going to butcher it because I always do this with European names. His name's Stefan Brunner. He works with me at Cycling 74. He's one of my coworkers, and that's enough for us to talk to him about. But recently we had a company gathering, and I got a chance to hang out with Stefan for dinner, and he started talking about some of his other artistic pursuits, and there was some really exciting stuff there. So I really wanted to get him on the podcast to be able to talk about all this stuff. And so with that, let's say hello to Stefan. Hey man, how's it going?
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, everything's going well. Um, Thanks for actually pronouncing my name pretty well. It's
Ah,
Stefan Brunner, and I think you did not put the umlaut into the name, which most people do.
ah,
Brunner.
oh, interesting.
They want to over Germanify it, you
Ah,
know.
I see. Okay. Yeah, well, it's funny because for some reason there are subtle combinations of vowels in a lot of European languages that just my combination of tongue and throat can't seem to coordinate to pull it off. So I appreciate you helping me through that one. So hey, why don't we start off by having you just talk a little bit about your current work, all the different things that you do.
Sure. What was the last thing I did? The last thing I did was being on stage with Arto Lindsay in the Elbphilharmonie Hamburg and butchering his sounds even more than he does. I love playing with him. He's such a great live player and great human being and great musician. And I live process his sounds to spatialize the stuff. A lot of Max for Live, big live sets, and take the live sounds and process them further, put them into space and things like that. That's one big staple of my work, live processing of sounds.
Okay.
Another one is there's just been a record coming, it just came out with the Hour of the Wolf, which is playing live with my own guitar. I'm a studied guitar player too, and which is also highly processed. Again, Max for Life for the rescue, and playing in a duo with a turntablist, which he alters his turntable in ways I at least have never seen it before. Doing improvisational music based, in this case, on some kind of associative story-based narrative score. And the third big staple of my artistic work is doing audio and media installations for various things. And what was the latest bigger thing that came there? Oh, it was an algorithmic composition for the Philharmonie in Szczecin. This is where the Polish people will cry out because I can never pronounce that name right. This was together with Apparatchik, a Norwegian art collective with members like Magne Furuholmen or people like that, for example, which I work together a lot. And this with my artist duo Audio Color, which I do with Tim Ringewald, another Berlin-based artist. And of course, the big thing that I also do is working for Cycling 74. Yeah, this is where art and technology, there's always this field where this stuff meets in me. I love technology. I'm deeply into computer programming, but I'm a studied guitar player and experimental musician. So this kind of tension, there's no tension actually. For me, it's a very fluid, natural thing between those two things, technology and art.
Well, it's interesting to me too, like looking at the different kind of art practices you have. In some cases, you're kind of a support person doing specialization for Arto Lindsay's work, right? In other cases, you're a performer, like what you do with Hour of the Wolf, and in other cases, you're kind of a distance participant, which is the installation stuff. Do you enjoy one over the other, or do you kind of like being able to round robin and just do each of those things when it's been a while? How do you prefer performance, or do you prefer programming, or do you just like a nice mix?
Definitely the nice mix thing. And thinking about this performance aspect, for me, it's one really important part is for me that technology and computers are nowadays good enough to be instruments and to be played
Mm.
as instruments. And if you pair them with a guitar, you just can really just play this thing. You just augment your instrument basically. Same thing with the spatialization. I would see myself there on stage as just like a bass player or maybe a more keyboard player in this
Right,
case.
right,
I'm using live sounds, but I process them that heavily and add so much musical content or meaning to them. At least I try. And I try to add musical meaning to them so that in the end it's like another instrument. And so this is this playful aspect of that's super important, especially when you're programming and doing conceptual things. I need it in my life.
right,
This
right.
kind of now there's a concert, there's an audience, we share this moment together now and it will never come back. You know what I mean? This
Yeah,
is
I
this.
always find that really compelling. And in fact, it's one of the things where a lot of times people kind of beat me up because I tend to not record my performances. Some of it is because just for myself, I want it to exist just in that moment of time. It's almost like disappointing when I when I go back and listen to a performance. A lot of times it's better than I remember it, but there's something about the visceral nature of that performing in that moment that seems really vital and important and powerful, you know.
Yeah, totally.
Now, I'm curious about the Hour of the Wolf group. So you just released something with that duo, right?
Exactly.
First of all, you mentioned that you're working with a turntablist who like modifies the turntables in some peculiar ways. What are you actually talking about when you? I mean, is it like he breaks them or he like hacks them in some way, or because on the site you listed as prepared turntables. I'm just curious what's going on, what it is that your partner is doing that you're responding to.
Imagine a standard DJ setup, two techniques. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you have these two techniques turntables. Now he, for example, takes out a turntable completely and just puts in a drum, and then puts the needle on the membrane on the drum of the drum. And
Oh.
suddenly you have when you slide with your finger over various devices along the drum, or you put something on it like a percussive thing, you have the needle as a pickup and have a very specific system for percussion and stuff like that. And
Oh, that's
really
really
weird.
interesting.
Or you take a rubber band and mount it directly into the needle. So you prick the needle into the rubber band, and then by pulling the rubber band and playing it like a string, you can make extreme bass noises, so bass
Mm.
sounds. Now add a compressor, add and on the other table add really high scratching skills and loop playing records and things like that, and you have Pedro Lopes, this turntablist, and you have a universe of sound, which is really great to respond to. Yeah,
That sounds fascinating, but at the same time, it seems like it would be kind of hard to play with something like that because you just want to sit there and gawk at what they're doing the whole time. It's got to be fascinating just to watch it.
yeah, that was our first session. You just described our first session,
Oh, yeah, there you go.
where, where I was just sitting there. So, what are you doing?
Now, you said that you play guitar and you're processing it with live, with big live sets.
Yes.
But also, again, on the site, it mentions that you it's processed guitar and crackle box. What's a crackle box?
Yeah, for this one record, we used it. From Stein, the Dutch institute, they made this now cult device, this small thing where you have a battery in there and a few contacts that are open. And by connecting those contacts with your fingers, you make noises.
Oh, I
And
see.
basically,
Okay.
the current is running, the electricity is running through your hand, So, but you don't feel it. It's just this low
Right.
electricity. Due to that fact, you can really play it somehow with your fingers. Now, imagine licking your fingers and
Uh-huh.
making a lot of changes
Oh, jeez.
differently and things like that. And I just discovered by accident that you can play this crackle box quite nicely through your guitar pickups. You just
Mm.
put it onto your guitar and then you can just play it through easily. It sounds great, and so I sometimes use it. Yeah, in one of the tracks it's used, as far as I remember.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds sort of like a mad scientist version of a modular synthesizer or something, where instead of patch cables, you're like licking your fingers and going at it. That seems crazy.
Yeah, but for these Eurorack modules, you have those knobs where you just put your fingers on.
Oh,
These
yeah.
contact knobs. It
Right,
is
yeah.
open contacts. You can buy it as a module too. It's a similar technology, not the
Right.
same. The Crackle box, the whole sound making thing runs through your fingers. So that's the
Interesting.
idea,
That's
as
crazy.
far as I remember, at
That's
least.
crazy. I want to talk more about the Hour of the Wolf project because I got a chance to listen to it extensively and I have a lot of questions. But before we get into that, I'm really curious, given this broad range of things that you do for art, for your art, and all these things that you seem really comfortable with, I'm curious about your background. You said that you're well studied in guitar, but also you're clearly a very well educated programmer. You also have a lot of confidence both in performance but in installation setups. I'm curious what your background is and how you got to be this sort of like mix of artist and technologist that we see today.
To take this question literally, from Austria and from Vienna, to be more specific. Education-wise, I just started programming computers or playing around with computers at the age, I think, of 12 or 13. My father brought one home, and there was no games back then, so you just had to program stuff for fun. So that has always been there, and at the same time, always had my parents always looked after me learning an instrument, and then I think the what do you call it? The weird flute recorder
A
or
recorder, yeah.
yeah, classic. At 4 years old, the recorder playing Christmas songs. That's my musical roots. Like so many else's. No, but picked up the guitar and in during puberty wanted to be a rock star. Had a band, did indie rock and pop, and actually earned my living for a while as a guitar player, also playing jazz on weddings and stuff like that, playing gigs, just playing around. So that there comes the stage thing. So I just played a lot of gigs. Then from the technology side of things, I studied computer science, but I stopped it very quickly because I just made money anyway
Mm-hmm.
with the thing, as so many other people. And there's always been this thing at this one time having the band, being around with the band, touring with the band. On the other hand, for example, being part of an internet provider, Silver Server in Vienna, where it was deeply rooted in this art surrounding. There
Okay.
comes the media art thing, for example.
Right.
So there was the first touch with media art and interactive networked art and things like that. With that connection, we, for example, did my biggest audience hit together with Michael Aschauer, ASCII World Cup. We streamed what was it, the 2006 World Cup in 80 to 25 characters ASCII art live.
Oh no.
You
Oh
could
my goodness.
telnet into a computer, and then you have this 80 to 25 shell,
Right.
and it was a live stream of ASCII art, 25 or 24 frames a second. It was really ASCII letters that would exchange, and
Yeah.
you could watch the game, every game. I think we made 2 terabytes of traffic.
Oh my
About
god.
I don't know how many million people. That's 15 million telnet connections.
Unbelievable. Wow.
3
Yeah,
terabyte of traffic.
that's unreal. What technology did you use to transcode the video into ASCII art?
Whatever I could scrape off the internet. Back then, it was not a big internet, but
Right.
I can't remember, to be honest. There was something that where you could turn bitmaps into ASCII, and I made it somehow streaming. And instead of a speaker, we ripped off some live tracker from some newspaper and translated into English and back again.
Uh-huh.
And back again, so multiple translations so that you could make total gibberish, so weird things and stuff. So, but yeah, yeah, things like that. It's just never stopped doing stuff. Yeah, being introduced to Max and the Music University in Vienna actually in 94, 95, 95 I think, through a friend.
Were you
And
attending music school?
I did study jazz guitar, but at the conservatory and then an American Institute of Music, it was called, in Vienna.
Mm.
Basically, I think like this ripoff of these Berkeley courses.
I see. Okay, right, yeah.
This thing in Vienna. And then I went back later to university to do the Institute for Electroacoustic, basically computer and experimental media course for 3 years, which I finished then actually. And this was great. This was really, really a big, big milestone in my educational life. This was really important. And I can totally recommend the teachers there. It's ELAC, Institute of Electroacoustic Vienna, really cool people. And they influenced a lot of people I know and opened up to a lot of thinking about what is experimenting, what is possible, what is sound, for example. Not notes, not music, but how to describe sound, what are transformations. We had one professor that taught all about transformations, which was mind-blowingly good, Günter Raber. What are transformations you can make on sound? Yeah, this can fill easily half a year or a year to just talk about how you can transform into sound in something else, what qualities you want to keep, what qualities you want to change, and things like that.
Sure. What school was this again?
University of Music, Vienna.
And I'm curious about this because that's what you describe is actually similar to a track that I took, which I studied jazz guitar formally. And then ended up, for a variety of reasons, ended up going a different direction. But unfortunately for me, I didn't quickly have the experience of getting to somebody who opened my ears to experimentalism. I mean, I did some in the school, but it wasn't until much later that I did. And in a way, that background of jazz and sort of like the very traditional trappings of jazz really made it difficult for me to intuit my way into experimentalism. I literally kind of found myself with a band where people were sort of like forcing me to get out of my shell, and it was really it was a transformative thing. But it sounds like you had the benefit of somebody in the educational stream being able to say, "Oh, stop for a second. Let's examine these things at a more elemental level."
Definitely. And I really find it interesting that you say the entrapments of jazz, because I felt that too for a while, especially if you play on weddings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
But only in recent days I find it again possible to think of combining those things, of this experimental sounds that I do, and the idea about jazz improvisation, and that those can feed off each other, and even the tonalities that you use in jazz and stuff. But yeah, this educational step was deeply rooted also in the community I was hanging out, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So hanging out with people back in the days, mid-90s, a lot of this there was techno coming in. There was a lot of electronic music coming in.
Right, of
Through
course.
this internet provider also, the art internet provider, all this was coming in, and so many people in this time went through this 3-year course on the music university.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all around it was very present in this community.
Yeah, it was in the air, right?
It was, yeah, exactly, and so it was only it felt it was only a matter of time that I ended up there. So it is really strong. Yeah, the community was very important. It's the new electronic music and stuff.
Right, right. So what was, I mean, the funny thing is that you didn't seem to get drawn into the burgeoning techno scene directly. You kind of struck out on your own. Or do you have like a secret techno life that you haven't shared?
I did do one or two deep house tracks for some installations, or sounding like that. I don't even want to say deep house
Yeah,
because
right.
some actual deep house producers would laugh at me. But they worked, I would say, at these installations with a Viennese artist collective, Ringing Bling. They do really beautiful, very colorful installations that change due to the lighting that they are in. They made a really big, deep beat-based stuff. So
I see.
I'm not
Okay.
at all opposed to that, and I love the sound design that goes into this
Yeah.
and those tracks with super minimal things. You just have 3, 4 instruments, and there's so much perfection in the sound design, even in one snare hit. And so this can be great. But I have always found myself just more fulfilling to get my guitar, prepare a few patches, get my guitar, jump on stage, and go for it,
Right.
and interact with other people. If I want to have the conceptual thing, I go to this, and I can have my outlet in either programming or in this installation pieces.
Installation work, right. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's about music, it seems that I just prefer my outlet to be more spontaneous and not as perfectly sound designed as so many of those techno tracks.
hmm
Maybe
It,
that's one of the reasons.
well, it's interesting though that you say that because this is a commonality I've seen in a lot of people that work in the computer and music world, which is that there's something about doing computer based stuff that because you do it all day long, it lacks the immediacy that you want. So people, whether they move to Eurorack systems or pick up a guitar or bang on a drum or whatever, there seems to be a predominance of walking away from the computer and beating on something physically, right? It's funny because many of these people are the same people who probably have the most facility on something like Max or Ableton Live or whatever because they have spent so much time with it. But it loses some of the drive to use it when you're also doing it for work.
I do use it heavily. I do use Max really heavily,
Uh-huh.
and it's super important for my stuff. And it's a big part of composing sounds is programming something in Max. I do Max devices
Mm-hmm.
that will make this processing of my guitar, or that will control some other VSTs or
I
whatever
see. Okay.
in some weird ways based on envelope followers and stuff like that, so that they can have whatever. So there goes a lot of sitting in the studio, just sound designing before I can go on
Interesting.
stage.
Well, okay, so it is a pretty unique thing. Now, do you use many hardware devices, or is it just kind of like your guitar plugged into the laptop and you go? Do you
That's
use
it.
other pedal boards?
I have a foot controller.
Oh, okay.
So this soft step
Yeah,
thingy
yeah. Right.
to be able to not look at the computer most of the time, so to not touch, so be have the hands on the guitar.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, what I like to do is imagine a live set, and each track is an instrument. The instrument is, for example, the simplest example is a pitch tracker,
Uh-huh.
and from the Ableton corpus, there's a resonator that has a MIDI sidechain.
Okay.
So now think that the pitch tracker tracks your guitar playing, and is not very exact.
Mm-hmm.
So you can by playing determine when the pitch is basically detected. This pitch tracker then sends MIDI notes into the resonator and retunes the resonator while you're playing. So in the end, you have this weird system that reacts on to your playing. While you're playing, changes the resonator and changes the resonating frequency and stuff like that. And this is basically an instrument you have to learn. You have to actually sit in your studio, have this setup, and find out what can it do? How if I hit it really hard, what can it do? A lot of resonance, a lot of sustain and stuff like that. When I put on with my playing style, this and that. And so this is basically something you have to practice, an instrument. You made an augmented instrument.
You may end up having to change even some of your playing style in order to support what you want to do, right?
You have to practice it. You just cannot start playing. Yeah, you can start playing with an e-bow, but you should maybe try out a few ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And this is one of the things I try to do with the guitar, making this kind of systems that I call instruments, augmented instruments.
Well, so given that you are drawn to this performative sort of like combination of instrument building and then performance, what do you bring any of that to the installation work that you do, or is that kind of like a completely separate discipline for you?
Good question. I think there I can use more my background and being able to sit still at a table for a long time and concentrate on something, either doing sound design for an installation piece or doing actual programming for an algorithmic composition like this in Szczecin, where the movement of cars was translated into a score, and the score was then played by the Philharmonic there after an arranger had a really good look at it and changed it over again. But still, even there, it's a very collaborative approach and working together with people there. I'm rarely working alone and stuff like that. And it's very often a handoff where you just do your part and then trust the other person to do their part. So yeah, I think the collaboration part is still there.
Interesting. And how did you get started doing installations? Because when we talked, I mean, and when I've heard like noise about stuff that you've done, you do stuff all around Europe. I'm curious, is this all based off of people that you met through this internet provider, or was there some other avenue that also opened doors for you?
People you meet, Willie, people you get talking to. I met Arto because I was introduced by a friend, Matt Jackson, and million thanks to him again for introducing us just for lunch. And we had lunch, and then Arto said, I have tomorrow a concert. What you do sounds interesting. Want to go on stage tomorrow? And
Jesus. Holy Christ.
And do we have rehearsal time? Maybe at soundcheck. Okay. This was 8 years ago. Since then, we play together from time to time. So just go for it. That's the only thing. Just pretend you are able to do it, and then make the best out of it.
And what exactly are you doing in that situation? And you mentioned that they have a large live set and you're doing specialization, but can you explain a little more about what actually is happening that's got you on stage?
Yeah, first of all, it didn't come from nothing. So I was before in China playing at the expo 3 months in the Austrian pavilion with classical musicians, 9 to 5, really 3 months, 9 to 5, being on stage with classic. But I wanted that gig because I wanted to go to China, and it was great. There I developed a lot of these things, what you can do with live sounds and put it into different loudspeakers, into multi-channel surroundings and stuff like that. So going then on stage with Arto was not as frightening as it would sound like. It was more like, okay, never played with that guy before, and a jazz musician knows to deal with that situation.
Right.
He knows what he can do, and then goes on stage with a new guy, which is exciting. So what exactly is it? It's more different. It's a simple thing would be Arto does a lot of noise based sounds that are very rhythmic and very emotional. And now imagine him playing his guitar up front, coming from front of house, and I have let's say 4-channel in a minimum system, so you have back speakers, and I just take his sounds and delay them a little bit and cut them up rhythmically and project them through the back speaker. So you get a slap from his sound in the front, and then you get a stump from the back. And I can influence the timing and everything, and from where it comes, the sounds, and things like live. So I have a few knobs in my hand that basically where I can basically play this boom,
right,
the thing with the rhythmic that I want and to answer and things like that.
Yeah, so you actually have you've got your hands on a controller while you're doing this. Exactly. It's interesting because I actually think that for these kind of improvisational things, I think that a background in jazz actually does help, because a jazz player, no matter whether you're doing sad wedding gigs or you're blazing it out with a really exciting group, there is kind of one commonality with all of them. You have to be tuned in to listening to other people, waiting for sort of like implied cues that tell you when somebody's going to transition out of what they're doing, or when there's going to be a sectional transition or whatever. But there's like an awareness of what everybody else is doing that is a really critical part of being a jazz musician. I think that it really helps when people take up electronics to still bring that with them to improvisational gigs.
Totally, absolutely, and but it is this challenge to not get stuck into the jazz ways, because there is this very big tradition and traded ways of doing things, like playing it at fours and all these things, playing at a specific tempo, for example.
Oh, right.
Which does not make a lot of sense in some experimental surroundings.
Right.
But on the other hand, what is also there is this thing of keeping it together, being tight, being together, making some rhythmic and transporting emotions, for example. No matter what, if you're doing super experimental noise-based music or something like, there is, at least for me, I love this thing when it comes across, when you just transport emotions, all these things. And this is very similar to jazz and this, or I would say free jazz.
Right.
If you think about what kind of energy free jazz can bring across, it can even deliver a political message. Free jazz,
right.
and if I even get 10% of the power that those people could deliver with experimental stuff, I'm already satisfied almost.
Yeah.
And I think there's a strong connection, free jazz and experimental improvisations.
Sure. Yeah. Well, in fact, it seems like, I don't know. It seems like sometimes free jazz can be kind of a conduit from things that are very academic and very theoretical. There's something about the free jazz orientation that really grounds it in humanity, right? They can take technologies and really change them just by the very humanness of how that stuff works. Yeah. Now, for all this talk of jazz, one of the things that I got from your discussion of some of the work that you do is that you interact a lot with classical musicians, right?
Not a lot.
Oh, really? Well, because you kind of mentioned the Philharmonic and then this thing
they
with Expo and
they have been shielded away from me by
so
an
you don't work with them.
by an it's um, by an arranger. I actually never met any of those. I met the people in China, of course, and played
Uh-huh.
with them and everything, but this was more of a handoff process where I generated score material and it got selected, so parts of it, and then an arranger would take it and put it in front of the orchestra.
I see. Okay.
And similar things happened. And those apparatchik guys were also involved in the selection process.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
So when
not too
you,
much touch
I see,
with classic
when you
musicians.
heard the result, did it seem to match what you had imagined coming out of the score that you developed, or did they kind of mash it into something that they wanted rather than what you were trying to produce?
They completely mashed it into something that they wanted, but that was it was absolutely the purpose of things.
Oh,
That was
interesting.
from the beginning the purpose of things. The first time we met with the conductor and with Mogner and stuff, and the arranger, it was they were surprised that we were the ones saying, just we did this a few times already. I did this with the Silver Boys in Norway, boys choir and stuff
Okay.
like that. And we did this already. And what we want is this handoff. We do something up to a certain point, and then we trust you to take it and take it further.
Okay.
Just take it and do your stuff with it. And in the end, we're gonna sit there and listen to it and see and listen what came out of it. And I was absolutely not disappointed because the guy did great work. I think it was an awesome piece of music, which I could never have come up with. And
That's really interesting. Because I'll tell you, what you're saying right now, the things you're telling me right now are very different from what I typically hear people say, which is that there's this tendency when you're doing compositions and you're doing score creation or whatever to really firmly, it's almost like it feels like it's your job to strenuously uh, try and get people to take your vision and perform it, right? And so it seems amazing that you literally build into this system and you're satisfied with the idea of, I do it up to a point, then I hand it off and it becomes what it becomes. That seems like it could be kind of hard to let go of it in that way.
it's like working with a band
Uh,
somehow.
yeah.
Isn't it? And of course, in a band, you always have this kind of, it's my song. It should
Yeah, I
sound
was going
like
to
I
say,
want.
inevitably you get in a
It's,
fight and you quit the band, right? So there's that.
yeah, sure, this thing happens, but yeah, and of course, there's times where I would sit forever on this one piece of music and have discussions with the mastering engineer because it was not what I wanted. And this thing, and we have to change this and whatever. Sure, there is pieces of music that I want like that. But it's a really liberating experience to have pieces of music that you don't do like that. That you just trust other artists to do their thing, and then be. I've never been negatively surprised. I've always been positively surprised uh, by that process.
Yeah, I get that. And it's funny because so often when we work with other great artists, we're scared to let go, even though one of the reasons that we're excited about working with them is knowing what they're able to do with work. So I guess you're bringing up a great point, which sometimes there's some really good that comes from being able to let go and allowing work to grow its own way. So that's pretty cool. So our time is just about up, but before I let you go, I have one question, which is you've gotten to do an amazing breadth of stuff. You know, you all these different kinds of whether it's performance or development or installation work or all of these different things that you've been involved in. Is there something that you haven't done that you're dying to do?
I don't know. I don't work very goal oriented like that. Just more, uh, if some opportunity arises, I most often say yes, and that always brought me to places, and rather than making goals like that, I want to do that, and it would be great if you're doing that. I would rather say a few more times yes to some weird stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly find myself in a place I would have never expected myself to be.
Sure, sure.
And for example, making sound design for a parade in Miami, stuff like that. So yeah, I I don't know. It really honestly nothing comes to mind at the moment.
Well,
Maybe
that's
also
pretty cool. I mean, it sounds like that you just made yourself open for whatever comes your way. That's pretty cool.
I would love to make a techno record. Just kidding. Maybe kidding. I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know. If nothing else, you're in the right place for it. So just ask around.
Exactly.
If there's a person on your left and a person on your right, and they've probably both made techno records. So you're
Most likely, yeah. Most likely better ones that I could ever produce.
well, Stefan, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me. This is really fun to get to know more, but also to kind of dive into your process and some of the ideas. For people that are interested in this release, the Hour of the Wolf release, where can they go to find out more about that?
It's been released on a London label, Discrepant. Discrepant.net.
Okay.
And there it's Sukkata tapes. It's a tape release actually. No worries, you order the tape and you get the download code.
Digital download, yep.
And but you have a physical. I like the idea a lot when they proposed this thing of doing this, and you can you can buy the tape. And the other thing is there is actual handmade vinyls from a Viennese artist, Karl Salzmann. He hand poured vinyl, which now has really great. It's beautiful. They're really beautiful. He puts things in there like writing or like ground up other records, and some are half see-through, some are colored, and whatever. So you can buy those from me.
Okay.
If you through me, these are basically beautiful pictures that you put on your wall, but you could at any point in time take this vinyl, this picture, and put it on your record player and play it.
Oh, that's wild. That's a neat way of making artwork out of a musical release. I really like that as an idea. That's so cool.
Yeah, Carl is an amazing artist. I love his work, and I love that this collaboration could take place. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, and I'll make sure I have links for all of this stuff on the show notes too, so people can access it. Well, with that, Stefan, I'm going to let you go. Have the rest of your day. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks again for having me, and it was a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. See you later.
See you. Bye.
Many thanks to Stefan for his time talking with us. It was really great to catch up with him. You can kind of hear from the things we talked about that there's a lot going on there. Every time I talk to Stefan, it's pretty fascinating. It was really great to hear about some of his most current work. I want to thank all of you for listening. Feel free to reach out and drop me a line. It's ddg@cycling74.com or ddg@20objects.com or darwin.gross@gmail.com. Any of those will work. I look forward to hearing from you. With that, I'll let you go. Have a great week. Bye.